Welcome to Lawsuits and Lessons, people, the show where you hear from some great entrepreneurs, insights and their experiences. You get some great legal advice on different issues and perspectives, and you just hear a really great conversation. And I want to bring in the host. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm just the co-host. The main host is my man who, like Bachman Turner Overdrive would say, is always taking care of business. It's John Fagerholm. What's up, John?
Hey, what's up, Steve? What's up, everybody? Happy New Year. Great to be back on our first show of 2026. Can't believe it's 2026 already.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But I wanted to ask you, because you're a guy who has a lot of stuff going on. And I talk to entrepreneurs and ask them this. Are you someone, do you write goals down for the year, or do you just spontaneously think of stuff and you start it? I mean, I know you have the law, but you have other things. How do you do that? Are you one of those I forecast second period, third period goals, or do you just something pops in your head and you run with it?
Oh man, I wish I could show you my bedroom and my mirrors. It's just writing everywhere, but it's not typically goals. It's thoughts. I've always been a list person. So I can remember as a kid, even, the first week or so, you're just so happy to be doing whatever. And then at some point I felt like I was wasting my life, and then I would just make a list of things I'm going to do before summer ends. So I'm a list person. I like to make my list for the day, the week, the month, the year. And then what I really like to do instead of goal setting is the last 100 days of the year, I pick 3 things that no matter what, I absolutely have to get this done. And it's usually a couple things that I pick out from the lists that I've made that I thought I was going to do. And then the year kind of gets away from you. So that's the way I do it. I don't really goal set the way they say you're supposed to goal set. It's just never worked for me. I always run out of time.
We have a family member of yours, and I want to find out if being an entrepreneur runs in the family, because my sister is not an entrepreneur. My brother is, and I'm somewhere in the middle. But tell us about our guest today, John. I'm excited. It's a family thing.
My guest today is my brother, Stefan. Love him a lot. Think he's great. He's done really well for himself as an entrepreneur. Very proud of him. And he didn't start out as an entrepreneur, I don't think. I mean, you think you know someone and then they tell you something different. So I'll let him speak for himself. But I never thought of him as the entrepreneurial type. I always thought of him as a guy that picks something, focuses on it, and tries to do really well with it. But within a system, and usually, employment or some other system that didn't belong to him. But recently, in the last decade, I think he really caught the entrepreneur bug, and then he's really, really, really kicked ass on a level that makes me go, wow, I should be working harder. So let me introduce my brother and good friend and brother, Stefan Fagerholm.
What's up, guys? Happy to be here. Happy New Year. As you can see, John and I got the same haircut. Oh, I'm welcome to the plot, Steve.
Yeah, welcome to the, I don't even know what you would call it.
It doesn't make a difference. We're just bald guys. So, Stefan, I want to hear about your path to entrepreneurship. If your brother affected that, if something you saw and it was something you wanted. I want to know how you ended up becoming an entrepreneur, because John said you're a very hard worker within a system. So what was your defining moment to make you want to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so most people, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs. I go to all these events and conventions and stuff. So I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs over the years, and most of them have this story of like, since I was 8 years old, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had a lemonade stand and I knocked door to door and I built my own business. And like John said, that totally wasn't me at all. I'm more of just like hard work my way up. I got into information technology. And so I kind of was just on that career path of working my way up through there, and probably would have made like middle manager at some point. And then I got into marketing in like 2012, 2013, like online marketing. I don't know if you guys have heard of the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, with Tim Ferriss, famous book. Yeah. So that kind of just got my interest going. And it kind of points out in that book how much time is wasted, like we're all on this default schedule as workers of 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. It doesn't sound too crazy now because there's so many entrepreneurs and so many online people, but back then it was kind of mind shifting for me. And so I got into online marketing, and actually one of the first ways I got into it was with John. As he mentioned, I've always been like a hard worker and been able to focus on things. So with his law firm, I started helping him with that and realized that, I could do this as an entrepreneur. That was kind of like a side gig I did with him, and help his law firm increase their leads and all that. And so I eventually just started getting into online marketing on my own. The first thing I started with was an online brand called Life Hacks LA, and it's basically like a what to do in LA. Currently, the account stands at about 220,000, I think, 20,000 followers. So, um, seeing how I could grow that account made me even more interested, and more opportunities came my way. And now I would say the majority of my time is spent with a company called Let's Hibachi, and that's been a real entrepreneurial journey. From I didn't found the company, but I met the founding partner very early on in his journey. He was struggling, and then we kind of teamed up, and now that's really kind of exploded.
Stefan, I don't think I know the answer to this, but at what point in time with what you were doing, I don't know if it was for me or whatever else you were doing, and dollar amount, were you like, oh, hey, I could just work for myself and do way better than if I was working for someone else?
Yeah, that's a great question because it was kind of a combination of two things. So with John, when I that was like my first thing where I was doing the online marketing, and that's what I got interested in. It's a very difficult field, but because it's always changing and there's always so much competition, but I just kind of laser focused on it. And when I was working with him, I was making very little because I was getting him very little results. But then at some point, it gets to this point where you're working less, but you're making more because you're getting better results because you know what you're doing at that point. Whereas your job, you're working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, no matter what, and you're basically getting paid the same. And I'll give you a quick story where it kind of mind shifted for me because it wasn't just about the money; it was about the time. In IT, I was doing very well. Like I had worked my way up to like a senior level IT engineer, and I had the dream job for being an IT person. I worked at Fox Studios a lot. My boss was incredible. Um, it was the funnest job I ever had, working on a studio lot. The job is easy for me because at that point I already had 10 or 15 years experience. But every day it would take me an hour to get to work. I would sit there for 8 hours, even though some days my job was done in 2 hours. So I was literally just sitting there staring at a computer, right? And then it would take me another hour to get back home. So it's like 10 hours a day every single day. This is before, online work got widely accepted. And then that's what really shifted my brain of like, it's not just that I can make more as an entrepreneur. It's like I get my time back, right? Like I'm not at the behest of someone else's time. And really it's the inefficiency that drove me crazy. Like, how does everyone have the same exact amount of time in a day to get their job done? It doesn't make any sense.
Stefan, let me add to that story because I just had a memory when you were telling it. And I remember your boss was really cool. I don't think I ever met him, but I remember that you were knocking out all of your work plus extra work in a short period of time during the day, and then spending the rest of the time kind of chilling at the studio and going and watching shows or doing all this other stuff. You had this conversation with him where he's like, hey, you have to be here doing all this. And you're like, okay, who's outperforming me?
It kind of got back into that 4 hour work week. If you guys are familiar with that book, a lot of it's like maximum efficiency and thinking things outside of the box. And again, back then it was kind of revolutionary. Now a lot of people are doing this already, especially with AI. They're making their job as efficient as possible and they can do 10 times the work in, you know, 1/10 the time. But back then it was just like everyone's on this default mode of like you sit down, you have your cup of coffee, you look at emails, right? So yeah, it got to the point where I was doing the work of the three guys I was with, not because I was so much smarter than them, but I was intentional about it, right? I was like, how can I get this done in the most efficient, quick way as possible instead of just kind of being a drone that shows up to work and, you know, muddles through the day. And so my boss is a nice guy, but he was very old school. Like, you have to be at your desk 8 hours a day, no matter what.
Okay, so when did the LA hacks start? Because you said you have 200 over 200,000, which is just a sick number. I mean, people get like 8. I know people with 8 followers. Like, oh, this great comedian. I have 8 followers. But when did you decide to start that, and how did you build? Because it is, you said, things constantly change. You make one crappy post and you can lose followers. How did you start building that? I mean, what was your thought process to start that site?
Yeah, so that started when I worked at Fox and when I had all that free time. So then I started doing Instagram. Honestly, a lot of it is timing. So if I were to start an Instagram today, now I've got 10 years experience. So I kind of know what to do, but it would definitely be much harder than it was back then. If I had gotten in 2 years earlier, like some people I had known, I probably have 1 million followers because I think like 2013, 2014, those were the years where like you could grow an Instagram like that, which wasn't that valuable at the time, but we all know by 2016, 2017, whatever. So I used a lot of the tactics at that time, just to give like general advice on growing on any platform. You have to do what the platform wants, right? So when TikTok came out, they were pushing these videos before Instagram was just pictures. So one of the ways I grew was I knew that Instagram wanted us to use Reels because they were trying to copy TikTok during this time period. So all I did was Reels. Now everyone does Reels, right? But at that time, they were really pushing anyone who does Reels because they were trying to encourage people to do Reels. So there's always these things going on within different platforms where they're trying to push certain types of content. So if you kind of follow like whatever that is at that time, then it's a lot easier to grow.
Now, what kind of content were you posting? I want to know the site. I mean, what were you posting that actually made people want to watch it? I mean, I have a TikTok account where I do a stupid guy, an old guy with a hat turned sideways, and I got 10,000 views one time, and I was like, wow, this is good. I usually get like a 1,500, but all the kids call me Unk because I guess that's the term for but they think it's me. I put my glasses down, I'm like, oh, but I get that, but it's hard to get views. Like, what was your content, and what do you think made people relate to it or just watch it?
So the account is called Life Hacks LA, and basically it's obviously LA specific, and it came from a hobby of mine. So actually, John helped inspire this, and a couple other people I know helped inspire this. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I was just blown away by how much there was to do. I'm from Seattle. That's where I mostly grew up. There's maybe two or three cool bars at that time. There's a lot more now, but there's like two or three things to do within a certain criteria. But when I got to LA, I was just blown away. Like there's a million places to hike, 1,000 good coffee shops. So I started creating a Google Doc of every cool place that I've went to. And there's stuff like speakeasies, or like I think John showed me this one, free yoga at the bottom of Runyon Canyon before you do your hike. So they're like these little hack things, right? And then when Instagram started getting popular, that's when I started sharing those from the coolest things that I had found. So it kind of came out of a personal hobby. And then once I hit like 10,000 followers, because, the first year it was just like family and friends who would like and stuff. Then I started getting serious about it and intentional and applying the stuff that I had been learning in this online marketing. And then it kind of blew up from there.
Tell us more about the hibachi company, because that's the one that I think has really done well for you, number one, but probably is the one that's most like a traditional business. So you have more of the traditional problems, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of interesting because one thing I want to mention about the life hacks thing is, I make money as an influencer. People pay me to go. I get free meals everywhere. That's incredible. But the biggest thing that's came out of it is the connections I've made. And that's how the hibachi came about. So the hibachi, the origin of it, and just to give a quick synopsis. So it's hibachi catering, right? So basically it's like Benihana, but at your house times 10, because it's this huge party and it's crazy. It's fun. John's been to a few. It kind of blew up as a niche during COVID. So this company reached out to me, Let's Hibachi, and they asked me to promote them on my Instagram. They said, hey, we'll throw you a free party. I wasn't expecting much, but I had never heard of it. I thought it was kind of cool. This is like 2021, so as COVID was still happening. So, they show up in my sister's backyard, and it was just wild, man. These three guys come in and they just start throwing sake down our throat. And it's just fun, right? So I'm like, this is amazing. One of the guys there, I could tell that he was either the owner or a high level boss, because he was just kind of in the back, observing. And the other two were kind of like the fun ones. And so before they left, I went to the guy that I thought was the boss, and I said, hey, listen, I think you have an amazing idea. I looked at your marketing. It's not that great. I know that I could blow this business up for you if you give me a chance. So let's meet. Long story short, we meet a couple weeks later, and they had been in Texas and they did really well in Texas. A lot of it had to do with the timing, right? Because COVID had came out and people in Texas were looking for something like that because you could have it in your backyard, the social distancing or whatever. And it's just with you and your friends and family. But they were struggling to succeed in Los Angeles. And so I made a deal with them. Before I was just doing like consulting, and I would get paid for like the online marketing expertise. But then I made a conscious decision to start doing equity deals, right? Like betting on myself. So I said, don't pay me. If I can get you to succeed in Los Angeles, then let me buy into the company. They weren't doing anything in Los Angeles because Los Angeles is actually a pretty tough market. You have to have good marketing in Los Angeles just because there's so many things that people can choose from. So they did well in Texas, but their marketing, they really didn't have any marketing. It was just kind of timing. And then they had a decent Instagram. That was pretty much it. So long story short, 3 or 4 months later, double, tripled their traffic in Los Angeles. We're in 30 cities now, and Los Angeles is still our number one city. But he, honored his end of the deal with Los Angeles. And then now we're in 30 plus cities because I basically told him, well, hey, let's take this thing that we did in Los Angeles and let's replicate it to all these other cities and let me buy in and let me be a partner. So now I'm a 20% partner in the company in all the cities.
Now, what made you sit there and come up with that idea to ask for equity? It has to come from somewhere because a lot of people would just want to make the money, would want to get paid because it's a scary thing when you say, because we all think we might fail. So it's a scary thing to say, I want equity. So is that just something came from your gut or was it from, how your brother works? Or, where did that come from? Because it's a brilliant idea. And for you, it's paid off. And it's just company continues to be growing.
Yeah. Part of it was definitely from my brother because of the work we did together. Because the first month I worked with him when I didn't know what I was doing, I worked my ass off that month. And I think I made $80 or something, and then 2 years later, I was making like $10,000 a month and barely working at all because I had the whole system down, right? So as I was getting recognized as someone who could bring people leads, I would get approached and people would pay me and I would see how much money I was making them. Like I would see where their business was and where we took it, but I would still get paid the same because it's like a consulting fee, right? And so before I even met the hibachi, I was turning people down because I was like, I don't want to work for $300 an hour or whatever, because it's really not worth the time, So it was kind of like perfect timing because I was blown away by the experience. As you can see with my Life Hacks account, I love experiences. I love interesting things. And it was such a fun, unique thing with your family and friends. And I wanted to be a part of it, honestly. I knew that they were only using like 5% of their marketing potential. So that's where that equity idea came from because I was willing to bet on myself, not take any money for the first 6 months, and knowing that there was a very good chance that we could turn this into something really, really big.
And that's the interesting thing about failure, success, and entrepreneurs, right? So Stefan had this experience and said, okay, I'm going to go all in on this thing. Whereas I would have had that same experience, thought it was fun. And even if the guy said, hey, invest in this company, I'd probably been like, hibachi, nah, So I don't know what it is, because Steve, you've asked me this a few times, like, what's that formula? I have no idea. I've invested in quite a few things and I think my success rate is like 20% maybe, so many things didn't go well, but the few things that did go well went so well that it was worth taking the risk the next time. So I know that if I had been in that backyard with my brother and my sister and Stefan had said to me, hey, we should go in on this hibachi thing, I'd have been like, no, I'm not doing this.
What's funny about the whole hibachi thing? Me and Joanne were driving down the other day near Philadelphia, near Philadelphia, right near the bridge. And we saw a Benihana. And that Benihana has been open since I was a kid. It's been open forever. And it's amazing. You sit there and it's one of those things, there's no one who doesn't not like hibachi. Like you never know, goes, oh yeah, Benihana sucks. Everyone's like, oh, Benny, even if they're vegetarian, okay, oh, we can get shit thrown in our mouth and go like this. And it's amazing because it's a lost dining experience. And it's great that you're actually bringing it. So how do you start? Who is your target market? Because it's something where it's, as I said, for a party and everything, it's great. But who's your target market and how do you expand your growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love Benihana. So one of my early jobs, my boss would take us to Benihana's almost every Friday. And what I noticed, I was hyping it up to my wife and kid. I took them and there was like no entertainment. The guy basically flipped one zucchini. How it is. It's like this with all businesses. They start out great and then they go corporate and then they just care about the bottom line and the experience is done, right? So again, I'm all about experiences. So when I got into the hibachi, the experience just kind of blew me away. Our target market is the person planning a party. So, for example, we do a lot of bachelorette parties. I don't know if you guys know, but bachelorette parties are huge now. They don't just do one day, they do an entire weekend. Crazy how many bachelorette parties we get, which is great for our chefs because we hired all young, good-looking chefs. But the target market is the person planning the party. So in that case, it would be the maid of honor, right? But really, our most valuable target market is birthdays because a bachelorette party, the maid of honor, you're a maid of honor, what, once or twice in your life, if you're lucky. Whereas a birthday, if we can get someone to book a birthday party with us, they're going to be like, oh, wow, this would be a great idea for my Uncle Joe. This would be a great idea for me next year. This would be a great idea for my mom. So, yeah, we really try to target birthdays right now.
And how do you target a birthday versus a bachelorette party?
Well, most of our bachelorette comes through some major strategic partnerships that we have. There's a few companies out there where a lot of bachelorettes go to plan their bachelorette parties. By the way, the bachelorette party cities, can you guys guess the top 4?
I can guess the top one, and it's in Tennessee. What's that?
Nashville. It's Nashville.
Nashville's number 1, which I had no idea until I started with this company.
I had no idea either. I was in Nashville on business on a Monday morning, and there was like bachelorette buses like going down like downtown, and they were partying. I'm like, man, it's like 9 a.m. Like, what's going on here?
Nashville's number 1.
Okay, I don't know the other 3.
Vegas,
not for us because when they do a hibachi, it's typically in an Airbnb. And what we realize is most people who go to Vegas for bachelorettes, they do it in a hotel. So it is one of the top bachelorette cities, but not for us. It's in Arizona. It's a city in Arizona.
Scottsdale.
Scottsdale's number 2.
Oh, all right.
This one's in California.
Oh, Palm Springs.
Palm Springs is crazy. It's almost catching up with Scottsdale and Nashville. Yeah, so we get a lot of those from these major strategic partnerships where they're planning the bachelorette and their party, and they're doing a whole weekend. So one night dinner at home is like perfect for them. With the birthdays, we do 10 to 15,000 parties a year. So now I've been focusing on the customers we've already booked in the past. And that's where the birthday comes in. Because now I'm sure you've seen it, a million times. You get a text from some company that says, hey, your birthday's coming up, or they just say happy birthday. So really utilizing like the people who already are aware of us, they're already happy with our service and they've used us in the past. That's kind of where the birthday marketing comes in.
Is there a different experience for a birthday and a bachelorette party? Like in a bachelorette party, do you have like big beefy guys without shirts doing it? Or I mean, how do you, because there's, it's known fact from comedy clubs, the worst thing you'd ever would see is a bachelorette party come in because they won't shut the hell up the whole show. Okay, because it's just that, she's getting married, give us blowjob shots. Like, shut up. But do you give the same experience to both, or do you change it up? Because they are completely different experiences. One's more family oriented and one's more like, hey, yeah, the bridesmaids want to get laid.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when someone books, the reservation manager works with them one-on-one and kind of gets a feel of what they want. There's a general experience. You're going to get the onion volcano no matter what. You're going to get the chef breathing fire. It's flipping zucchini. But we tailor it to what they want. And the bachelorette parties can get wild, like the chef jumping in the pool. And you've had Chef Adam before, John. I mean, we do a lot of sake shots for the bachelorette parties. They have some interesting shaped ones. That's all I'll say. And then for the, all the way down to little kids, 80-year-old grandmothers, they can make it super tailored to whoever it is while still giving you what you expect from a hibachi party, which is the good food, the, onion volcano, the zucchini, the egg in the hat, that sort of thing.
So Stefan, you guys scaled up really quickly, and I don't remember how many years, but if you got with the guy in 21, I mean, we're talking about less than 5 years, right? So what's been the biggest pain point of scaling up a business, to me, that takes a lot of people, right? So people are always the best part of a business, and they can also be the worst part of the business, right? So what has been the pain points, and what has been the the good part of what you're doing?
Wow, there's so much. So yeah, I actually started with them in 2022. They were in 3 cities in Texas. Now we're in 30 cities so it's been about 3 years since I've been with them, like 3 and a
10
half.
a year, 10 cities a year. That's pretty good. That's a lot of scaling.
Yeah, so when I first started with the company, I mean, it was literally like the chef only collects cash. There was like 6 or 7 different websites. They had a website per city. Well, I mean, at first they just had the 3 cities, but then as I joined and hadn't fully got my bearings, they every time they added a city, they would add a website. So it was completely like logistical mess. Now, my background is marketing and that's what I came in to do, but I also like systems and I also like to make things as efficient as possible. So although it was difficult and a headache in a long stretch, um, I kind of like it, you know. So now things are a lot more systemized. But the way the company is divided up is my partner is kind of like takes care of the service part. So he's the head of all the chefs, you know, obviously because I don't have any experience with chefs or whatever. And then we have a head chef in each city who's a partner in that city. I manage the front office, which is about 6 or 7 staff, and, you know, I do all the marketing and all the strategy with the marketing. But yeah, I mean, it grew like crazy. I mean, if you think about going from 3 to 5 cities to 30 cities,
And what does that mean when you say like a city? Is that like 10 a month, 100 a month? Like, like what is that? What does that look like?
there's some cities that obviously do a lot better. Los Angeles is our number 1 city now, and, you know, there's a lot to be said about California and how difficult it is, but there's just some factors in California that are hard to replace, right?
Yeah, weather. You can't replace it.
There's weather, which is good for our business because we're an outdoor company. So year round, like Palm Springs, for example, is seasonal. Vegas is seasonal. Chicago, Philadelphia, those type of places are seasonal. Places like LA, maybe Austin, a few other places, they're more consistent year round. But you got to think about the amount of people there are in the Southern California area. So I looked it up right before this because I wanted to talk about this. Like Texas, we do pretty well. And I know Austin and San Antonio, that area is one of the fastest growing. But guess how many people there are in the Austin, San Antonio area that's growing?
I would say altogether, I don't know, 5 million maybe.
Perfect. It's just about 5 million. Now, Southern California, you can get to Riverside County, Santa Barbara County, LA County, Orange County, San Bernardino County, 5 counties within an hour drive, which is about as far as we go. You know how many people that is?
Okay, hold on, let me guess. Okay, because I know LA County is about 14 million, and that's the biggest county in America. So I'm going to say 20 million.
24 million. I mean, think about that. You've got 5 million versus
So
25.
5 times the opportunity.
Yeah, within a drivable distance, right? So like it's just geographically set up so well that once you make it here, I mean, you've got so many competitive advantages. So to answer your question, every city is a little bit different, but as far as the volume, but we did about 13,000 parties last year, and then we're on pace to do 15 this year. We're projecting to do a minimum of 15 this year. So that's a lot of parties.
So what does Southern California look like then in any particular I'm assuming it's all weekend parties. So in any given weekend, how many parties are you throwing?
I think they did 1,000 in December. Yeah, a lot of it has to do with the amount of chefs that you have to. You know, like you said, most of the parties are on Saturday, and so you know it's hard to find someone who just wants to work 1 day a week.
How do you find so many chefs? I mean, yeah, it's 1 day a week, so people might do that as a part-time job, but to find, there's so many people, and it's no fact finding good employees isn't like it used to be. I grew up, you went to work, you were there 5 minutes. If you were 5 minutes before you were supposed to be there, you were late. I mean, that's how I grew up. So it's a matter of how do you find employees? Because once again, it's someone where someone can go, screw it. It's a Saturday. Who gives a shit? I don't care. How do you find quality people? Because you're bringing a quality service. And like anything, when it's customer service, the person wants more and they are looking at a Benihana and you have to exceed that. So how do you find good employees?
That's a great question because our business is all about the experience. If the chef isn't good, the experience isn't good. And that's all they're going to remember. The food is secondary. So when we started out, my business partner is from China, right? most of the hibachi, even though hibachi is Japanese, most of the chefs you find in hibachi restaurants are actually Chinese. So there's this huge community of experienced Chinese chefs in every state in the country, basically. So that's how he started. He had all old school Chinese chefs. So the cooking was not a problem, but there was some like language barrier issues, cultural issues, and some of these guys are older in places like Palm Springs and Nashville. You probably want a younger chef, right? So a couple years ago, we shifted our strategy, and also there was a problem with a shortage of chefs, right? Because there's only so many experienced chefs. You're competing with the restaurants. We've had a ton of copycat hibachi catering companies. So we were running into this problem where we had this shortage of chefs. So we created this training system, and we would find like one young, charismatic guy who was very hungry to succeed. John knows one of them, our nephew, Josh.
Well, our nephew is an awesome kid.
He started off in Vegas. I had to beg him to try it because he's like, I don't have any cooking experience. I don't know anything about this, but he had a great personality. He tried it, and now he's the head chef in like, I think 10 cities or something, and making a killing, kind of doing his own entrepreneurial journey. But long story short, we train them, and by we, I mean my partner, trains them in the way that he wants them to do it. And apparently, I didn't know this either until I started working with them. Hibachi cooking's not that difficult. So he would basically have them cook like 100 meals or something crazy within a 2-week period, like do test parties just over and over and over and over again, like a boot camp. And so that's how we were able to scale. We were able to take like really talented, charismatic young guys who didn't really have much going on or weren't making very good money and say, look, you can make more in these working 2 days a week than you make now 5 days a week. And that, that's a really strong selling point. And so to get to that experience level you were talking about of what the customer expectation was, we just have a rigorous training process. So the chefs actually live in a house that we pay for together. And, these are like 25, 30-year-old guys. So they're living their best life. And in that house, all they do is train for like 2 weeks to a month until they're ready. And then they'll go as like an apprentice chef. And then when they're ready to take their own party, that's when they kind of graduate.
But what's interesting about what you just said is that these guys are making more in one night than they make in 5. It really is a mental shift because we're trained from birth to get into this system, right? Where someone else determines what we make. That's exactly what happened with my first law partner. That's still a very good friend of mine. He was working at, I think it was Sony at the time. Virgin Records. He's working at Virgin Records 4 days a week. And then he was doing the attorney thing on his own 1 day a week at my office, right? And I told him, hey, I've got a extra space, just use it, because we were good friends from law school. And then very shortly after starting doing his own thing in my office, he was making more in 1 day working for himself than he was the other 4 days at Virgin. And then that's how we ended up becoming partners, because he's like, what am I doing here at Virgin, being told what to do by somebody and making this set salary that they gave me? And here I am working, a quarter of the time and actually 20% of the time and making more than those 4 days, And so it's just a complete different mindset with entrepreneurs. The problem with being an entrepreneur is that it's all a guessing game and it's all risk, right? So you rarely ever knock it out of the park the first time. You usually screw it up a bunch of times and you learn some lessons, right? And so most people just don't have the wherewithal to keep going. They would rather take the easy 5 days a week, somebody tells me what to do and pays me what they want to pay me. You know what I mean? So that's the real lesson there. The real lesson is not giving up. And, even if you're a born entrepreneur, no one is like a born success story. You know what I mean? Like you don't just go, aha, that business right there. And then it happens. There's like all of these things that you fail at, even if you stick to that same business, like let's say Facebook, right? There was a ton of failures before Facebook became Facebook. There was a ton of failures before Tesla became Tesla, so it just isn't what people think, that these people come out of nowhere and knock it out of the park, right? And most people aren't entrepreneurs because they quit after they fail. And that's not what you're supposed to be doing. That's not what what an entrepreneur, that's not what a successful entrepreneur does.
Well, it's like anything, if at first you don't succeed, try again, which you mentioned about, the pay, how a guy went from making, more in a certain time. Me and you had talked the other day, well, you'd emailed me about the minimum wage in California changing and how does that affect people?
I'm not a minimum wage guy, and I know that this isn't a popular opinion, but my opinion, I just don't even believe in minimum wage at all. I think when someone is good, you have to pay them what they're asking for, or they're going to move on to something else, right? So that's just my opinion, right? And I understand the whole argument about a livable wage, but most of that is based on types of jobs that aren't supposed to be livable anyway, right? So so there's the minimum wage in California that keeps going up, and it just went up in January to 16.90, I think it was. For example, in California, you have the minimum wage for fast food workers, right? Well, the argument for giving fast food workers more money, it was $20 an hour. I don't know what it is now. It's gone up. When the minimum wage went up, it should have gone up. The argument for that is that it's not a livable wage. Well, when I was growing up, fast food workers were teenagers, not adults, with families, right? So so it's never going to be a livable wage because the minimum wage goes up, the price of the product goes up. The people that are working minimum wage are usually using that product. So then again, you don't have a livable wage because all of the costs have gone up. So it's just this never ending cycle of inflating things that don't need to be inflated. So I'm just not a big believer in minimum wage. And Stefan, I don't think we've ever talked about this, but I don't know what your opinion is on minimum wage. And
Yeah, I mean, in our company, I think that if we paid minimum wage, we wouldn't have any employees. So, like you said, it's a little bit more of a higher end thing where you need to find talented people. A lot of our compensation is based on performance, right? Even our front office, they get paid a commission based on how many parties they book. So, when busy season, some of our front office people, they could miss what would be six figures in 12 months if you averaged it out. So, yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on it. I will say that all the nice things I said about California earlier about, you know, the weather and the amount of people, giving it that advantage over any other place, it definitely is the hardest place to navigate the laws. Like we're constantly saying, okay, we do this everywhere else, but can we do this in California? I don't know. I don't think so. So
the interesting thing about California is that it still is one of the best places to do business in the sense of making money, right? Because, like you were saying, just sheerly by population, you can't beat it, right? But it's the worst place to do business in the sense of trying to navigate your business through all the minefields that are California law or whatever. So I still believe in California. I still think it's a excellent place to do business. I just think things have to change, or you're going to have a bunch of businesses that are more localized and you're not going to have the big businesses, right? Because the big businesses can move anywhere. They don't care, right? It's the smaller business that can't move anywhere. So for example, like your hibachi business, it doesn't make sense for you not to be in California. It's your best market, right? But someone like Google, Google doesn't have to be in California. They can be like, hey, we're going to be in Timbuktu.
their operations doesn't have to be there, but they would still operate in.
They have customers using Google and maybe they have an office there, but it doesn't have to be the place where all the decisions are made, where all the employees are, so I think at some point there's going to be a balance, right? Like I just saw the other day that they're losing a couple refineries. And that's really bad, actually, because if you lose those refineries, your gas prices skyrocket, right? But they can't lose those refineries. There's just no way California is going to be able to lose those refineries. So they're going to have to come back and they're going to have to negotiate some sort of compromise with these oil companies because, they work on slim margins, just like grocery stores work on slim margins, just like a lot of businesses work on slim margins. And so if you take away that slim margin, there's no benefit for them being there, right? And so if you lose that business, I actually think in this case the oil companies have the leverage here because without those refineries, you have to take that gas and you either have to ship it somewhere else, get it refined and bring it back, so it costs more, or You just have to ship in gasoline that's already refined, which is going to cost more, right? And California actually has a nice petroleum business. There's oil here.
I had a question for you guys because I'm a big California guy and but I do see the challenges and I do see all these companies leaving and I see the cost of living is insane. But I hear the narrative of like, okay, California's going downhill, everyone's moving to Texas. But what are your thoughts on like why does it keep succeeding though? I mean, it went from when I first moved to California, it was the eighth largest economy in the world. It just recently went to the fourth largest economy in the world. And with all the talk of everyone moving to Texas and all these places, there's still a distant second or third to California. So even though California is not where it used to be, it's still number one.
Do you know why it's succeeding? And this is just the basic true answer. It's California. My friend from England who said when he grew up in London, and he said his goal was one day to live in LA and have a convertible. It's that persona. And yeah, people are leaving, but every day so many people leave, there's a bunch of people who want to be rock stars or actors or just whatever moving in there. So California, no matter what happens, people leave. People are going to there'll always be people there because it is California.
California's not going anywhere. So it's not about if it's doing the best or is it going to be in second at some point, or is this other place growing? It would take a long time for any state to catch up with California. I don't think that's the issue. I think it's just at that moment in time for whoever you are, what's the best spot for you, right? And the problem with California or the people that are moving out are not it's the middle class that are leaving because they're the ones that usually get hit. The rich are going to stay because it's California. You can afford it. Who cares if gas prices are $4 or $2? Like it doesn't make a difference to them, right? And then young people, which is basically the lifeblood of most economies. Of course, you're going to move to California because pretty girls, beaches, weather, all of that. And they're going to thrive and keep the economy going until they get to a place where they're like, hey, I just got married and I have a new kid and I want to buy a house. And they're going to go, hey, I'm going to move to Nevada, where it's cheaper to live and whatever else. So it's just parts of the economy. And then the parts of the economy that are leaving is the middle class and big business, right? So it's going to reduce the lifestyle, not even really the income of California, the lifestyle, because the income in California is mostly why California is so rich is mostly because of intellectual property. Like all these big companies own this intellectual property that's based in California. You know what I mean? So of course, and also because of the creativity in California, a lot of intellectual property is going to keep coming out of California. So it's always going to be pretty good. It's going to be good with tourism. There's a ton of stuff that's still great with California. The problem is not whether it's still good or not. The problem is which way is it trending and why? Like, why does it have to have the highest gas prices? It doesn't have to have that. Why does it have to have the highest taxes? We don't have to have that. So that's the issue, I think. Without a strong middle class, it's very hard to have anything affordable. That's the issue, right? But California is always going to be California, as Steve said.
I think the nation overall, you see this gap between like extreme poor and extreme rich and the middle class is shrinking. You really see that here because, you see all this talk about how expensive things are and how people are struggling and everyone sees it. I do pretty well for myself, but I see how expensive things are. But you go out to a restaurant and it's jam packed, right? There's that huge gap. There's this people on the top are just living life as they always have. And then the middle class is shrunk, and then there's people who just can't afford anything. So
the funny thing is when people think about the rich that are doing well in California, I mean, you don't even have to be you have hundreds of millions of dollars to do well in California. If you're making, I think 2 million and above, you're probably okay there, right? You're probably living in a pretty good neighborhood. You're safe. You don't care about gas prices. You're happy, that you get to run in the mountains or whatever it is. So we're not talking about like a ton of money, but it definitely is above middle class, right? So the middle class aren't going to be able to afford it.
Yeah, because I think before at least people considered middle class 100,000, but I mean, you can't live a good life in LA for 100,000. No way.
Be an entrepreneur. You have a shaky life, but you can have a good life. Stefan, What advice would you give to a young entrepreneur? Because I always ask our guests that because I think it's very important that young people do look to mentors. John tells amazing stories about him mentoring young people. But what's some advice you'd give to an entrepreneur?
We've kind of covered it a little bit earlier in the conversation. I think John mentioned it as not giving up. And then it's kind of, if I look back into my story, my most successful things, working with him, the life hacks thing, the hibachi thing, it's definitely delayed gratification because we were talking earlier about how people don't want to miss that paycheck and you don't want to work for free. But everything I've done that's just made a killing now, there was that sacrifice in the beginning of not making money, For the hibachi, it was like 6 months of not making money. For the life hacks thing, I went a year and a half when no one cared about that account, you know? So the two things would be not giving up and being willing to sacrifice something in the beginning to get that end result that you want.
Well, that's good, man. That's good. And how can people find out more about you? What if someone wants a hibachi party? Where are they finding you?
Yeah, well, if you're in LA, go to lifehacksla.com or follow me on Instagram, lifehacksla. But if you're in our 30 plus cities that we're in and you want hibachi, it's letshibachi.com. And we'll throw you one hell of a party if you want. Like you said earlier,
He'll send over hot guys.
hey, we do bachelor parties too. We got one female chef. We'll send Steve over there to take care of him.
Right, man. I'll show up in a Speedo and a bow tie, baby. And I'm getting tips. And I gotta say, people, if you want to reach out to me, well, first of all, go to all the Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, subscribe and follow Lawsuits and Lessons. We have some great guests. John gets some great people. He's got a great business pedigree. You're going to get information that you're not going to hear on other shows. Secondly, if you want to follow more about me, you can reach me at Cooper at coopertalk.net and go check out my other podcast, coopertalk.net. I have over 1,050 episodes with some amazing guests. And John, tell us how they can get to you and give us some of that great closing wisdom you have every week.
All right. Well, I don't know how great or wise it is, but you can find me at defendmybiz.com. What I would say is, for those that are watching and you want to be entrepreneurs, again, listening to Stefan's story, just don't give up, be intentional about what you're doing. And there are going to be failures, but what's that saying about failing up? That really is the truth. The more you fail, it just seems that the more opportunities open up for you. So thank you, Stefan. I really appreciate you coming on. I knew this was going to be a good podcast because you've got a great story of, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that say, I started from nothing and then I made it. And that's always a great story. But your story is great and different because I was never an entrepreneur and then I decided to do it. And then I succeeded. So that's a whole different class of entrepreneurs that probably didn't even know they could be entrepreneurs. Cooper, as always, thank you for keeping the show running. Thanks for the humor. And I appreciate you both.